Hi, here's my audience, Presley, Abby, and Sadie. Sewing New Beginnings, how I learned to embrace the thread of life. Have you ever felt a sudden urge to try something completely new? As someone who's always been more comfortable with words than needles, sewing has always intimidated me. Buying the expensive fabric with a fancy sewing machine, learning how to sew the button on right, or even learning how to stick the thread through the needle. Many of us have dreams that we put off due to fear or doubt. This speech is about overcoming those barriers and embracing the unknown. Sewing, something I once feared, became a rewarding experience that taught me the importance of facing my own fears instead of just running away from them. I'll share why I avoided sewing for so long, how I planned my sewing adventure, and the lessons I learned along the way. Let's start by looking at why I've never sewed before, even though I've always been curious about it. We all have something we avoid because it feels too hard, too risky, or you fear getting hurt. My biggest fear is fearing that the needle is going to stab in my finger. Also, when working with the sewing machine, the speed of the sewing machine and working with your hands so close to that thread and needle is also a big fear of mine. As a perfectionist, I was afraid of making mistakes. I once tried sewing a button only to rip a hole in the fabric. Frank Herbert states in his book, Dune, "Fear is the mind killer." It reflects how fear can hold us back from new experiences, just like how I held myself back from not learning how to sew. With school, work, and other commitments, I felt like I never had the time to try something new. In reality, time management and about priorities. Eleanor Roosevelt quotes, "It's never too late to learn something new," which motivated me. I started setting simple goals for myself, not too bad, not too basic, to sew a simple pillowcase. Starting small helped me make that task seem a little less overwhelming. I gathered resources. I purchased a sewing machine, and then I found a beginner's sewing guide from the library, which provided clear instructions. I also learned the anatomy of a sewing machine, which helped me learn the front and back of it so I could know exactly what I'm getting myself into. I used an online tutorial from YouTube from Tilly and the Buttons, and I learned how to thread a simple sewing machine, which helped me avoid common mistakes like ripping fabric or breaking the needle. On these photos on their website online, they give side-by-side photos, which helps me picture it and makes it a lot less easier and a lot less scary for myself. Now let me take you through the actual adventure of learning to sew and what it taught me. Right here is a website that helped me out an immense amount because it's simple and it helps me learn the simple patterns of sewing. I also used worksheets, which helped me when I first started to learn how to sew. I found that using these worksheets to practice sewing patterns was incredibly helpful. Also, with a side-by-side picture of learning how to sew correctly in a straight line in the right manner. These worksheets broke down the complex process into simple, manageable steps, allowing me to focus on one technique at a time. By tracing patterns on fabric or following along with detailed guides, along with this picture, like a zigzag pattern or even dotted or straight line, I gained a better understanding how these stitches work together to create a final piece. It was like learning a new language, with each pattern acting as a sentence and every stitch as a word. This method allowed me to build confidence and accuracy before moving on to more advanced projects. One of the most frustrating challenges I faced while learning to sew was constantly breaking needles. It seemed like every time I was making progress, I'd hear that dreaded snap. After some research and trial and error, I learned that this usually happens because of incorrect needle size and tension setting. When I completed my first pillowcase, I felt an immense sense of satisfaction knowing I had accomplished something new once I felt out. In Steve Jobs' commencement speech, the only way to do great work is to love what you do, which highlights the importance of passion in achieving excellence. My setbacks for sewing process, despite initial setbacks, fueled my determination to keep going. The passion is what ultimately led my success and the immense satisfaction I felt upon completing my first pillowcase. Along with completing my first pillowcase, I learned how to make the pillow as well. Another frustrating thing with sewing the fabric onto the sewing machine was getting the thread caught onto the fabric line. So when I would pull it and it would pull the fabric up, it would completely ruin my entire sewing pattern and my entire piece of fabric. So I'd start completely over. In Nelson Mandela's quote, "The greatest glory in living lies not in never failing, but in rising every time we fall." This perfectly captures the resilience and determination, which each mistake, like cutting the wrong fabric or breaking a needle. Just stepping stones to greater achievements and personal growth helped me complete the best of my ability to making a pillowcase. Sewing has been a rewarding and transformative experience. I've gained new skills, and more importantly, I've learned that stepping out of my comfort zone leads to personal and better growth. I challenge you all today to take that leap into something unfamiliar. You might just find, like I did, that overcoming fears opens doors to new opportunities and self-discovery.